Hey y'all, this is Jillian from Maxine Makes Magic, and today we're making a lemon meringue pie inspired by the Great British Baking Show. I received the cookbook as a gift from my mom right before our trip to London, so I thought what a better way to come back following our trip and make this amazing lemon meringue pie inspired by Judge Prue's recipe. All of the ingredients and the method can be found within the description of this video by following the link provided. We're starting off the recipe by creating our pastry crust. We need to cube up some butter and also measure out some all-purpose flour, followed by some salt, icing sugar, and 1 beaten egg. While I go ahead and get our ingredients together, a friendly reminder is if you'd like to support the channel, you can always like, comment, subscribe, and follow along for more videos just like these. Your comments, shares, all that kind of good stuff goes a really long way and is so appreciated. Jumping back into the recipe, we're going to measure out our icing sugar or powdered sugar using our scale, a bowl, as well as our colander because we're going to want to sift that sugar to get rid of any lumps or clumps. Using a whisk, we're going to take all of our dry ingredients and combine them together and then set the bowl aside. The last ingredient that we need for our crust is 1 large whole egg. I'm just popping that into a small dish and then using a fork to beat the yolk and the whites together so we can pour that into our mixer when we create the crust. While the original recipe does call to use your hands, I personally prefer using a stand mixer, or in this case my Vitamix, when creating a crust. I just find that it comes together in a more cohesive manner. So here you can see I took the flour and butter and started by pulsing those, followed by adding in the egg mixture as well, slowly into the top of the blender. I continue to run the blender on a low speed, allowing all of those clumps to come together into more of a shaggy dough. When it gets to the point where it's starting to really stick to the blade, you can give it one more shake and give it another pulse. With the Vitamix, there's also the option to use the tamper. I went ahead and used this just to encourage the dough to go more down towards the blade. Of course, that's totally optional. The dough is going to be shaggy once you take it out of the blender. If you move forward with the food processor or a blender, just be very careful when taking the dough out. Those blades are going to be super sharp. I went ahead and floured down my surface and took that shaggy ball of dough and brought it together so it formed a nice smooth ball. Once you have that really nice dough ball, you'll go ahead and pop that down on your floured surface and use a rolling pin to roll it out. You'll want to roll it out from anywhere between 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 inch thick. I had to do this a couple times. I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. I kept rolling mine too thin, so when I would go to pick it up off of the floured surface, it would tear. If the same thing happens to you, that's totally okay. Just take the dough and roll it back into a ball, reflour your surface, and go ahead and roll that dough out again. Just bearing in mind, if you roll it one too many times, the dough could get a little bit too tough for your pie crust, so just bear that in mind. But once you get that right thickness, it should be able to cover the entire depth of the pan you're using. I would recommend not using a glass dish. Dough does tend to seize up in the glass, so I used an aluminum pan instead, then proceeded to add my pie dough into the baking dish. Right off the top, make sure you're not stretching that dough to fit into the pan. If you do so, it'll make the crust too thin and it won't bake correctly. I unfortunately do not have a pie wheel, so I did just use a little paring knife to remove any of the excess dough that was hanging over the sides of my pie dish. We're going for the rustic look today, so if you have a pie wheel, definitely feel free to use one. Like I said, do not. But trust me, your crust is going to turn out just fine and you're going to love it. I completely forgot to record a little bit more of the prep before we put this pie into the oven. For the crust, you're going to want to take the back of a fork and just poke some divots into the bottom of the crust, followed by adding a layer of parchment paper and either some rice or some baking beans. This just ensures that your dough does not puff up too much in the oven. And then we're going to pop it in the fridge for 30 minutes to chill. Then bake in the oven at 400 degrees for 15 minutes. Now it's time to prep all of our eggs. We're gonna need 6 egg yolks for our lemon filling and 6 egg whites for our meringue. Truthfully, this is the most difficult part of the recipe because you cannot have any egg yolks fall into your egg whites or your meringue will not whip properly. So what I like to do is have 2 containers ready and use my eggshells once they're cracked to toss my egg yolk gently back and forth between the shells, separating the yolks from the egg whites. This does take some practice, so you might want to have a couple extra eggs on hand just to make sure if you're anything like me and you messed up a few times off camera, that you go ahead and get everything right and ready to go so you can set these bad boys aside and move on to prepping all of your lemons for your lemon filling. All right, y'all, this is the fun part. We're gonna start working with our lemons. We'll use a microplane in order to zest, cut and juice 6 lemons. We're gonna go ahead and use our microplane to zest our lemons. Just be super careful because microplanes can be very sharp and we wanna be as attentive and careful as possible when we're using this utensil in the kitchen. Once we've fully zested our lemon, we are gonna just go ahead and cut it in half and then use our juicer to juice the lemon. I will say I think the zest of 6 lemons was a little bit extreme. I love anything lemon, and this was so tart when it came out. So if you like a really tart lemon meringue pie, this is your perfect recipe. But if you want to bring the tartness down, take down the amount of lemons that you zest. Maybe only do 3 or 4 rather than the complete 6 that the recipe calls for. Once your lemon juice and zest are ready to go, you're gonna add some corn flour into the mix and use a whisk to combine. This is gonna give your lemon filling some structure. Once you've whisked for a few minutes to get all of those lumps and clumps out, and again, don't worry if there's still a few in there, we are gonna move this over to a saucepan on a very, very low heat and just cook it down. That'll also cook that raw flour down as well. Putting your saucepan on the stovetop and setting it to medium heat, you're gonna add orange juice as well as some water to the saucepan and begin to bring that to a boil. Once you get that simmer, you're gonna go ahead and turn down the heat a touch, moving it to about a medium low. You'll then add in that mixture of lemon juice, lemon zest, and corn flour directly into the pan. And you're gonna wanna continue to mix this together until it's thick enough to coat the back of a spoon, and then you can remove it from the heat. I love the incorporation of orange juice in this recipe. There's just such a brightness that complements the lemon so well. And as you can see here, we're just continuing to cook that down. It's getting that nice thickness and that change of color away from that bright orange we saw when we added the orange juice and more of that really pretty buttery lemon color. Once that mixture thickens up, we can take it off the heat and let it sit for a few while we go ahead and combine some castor sugar and the egg yolks we separated earlier. Once we have that homogeneous mixture, we're gonna pour in that lemon juice mix from the stovetop and continuously stir until combined. Once that mixture is combined, we're gonna add it back to our saucepan over medium heat and cook that custard down on the stovetop. The custard should give a little bit of a resistance. It shouldn't be as liquefied as it was in its previous state. So once that custard's done, you can go ahead and pour that into your chilled pastry case. Before we can bake our pie, we do have to make our meringue. So we're gonna take those egg whites and pop them into our mixer, as well as cream of tartar. It's gonna give the meringue some structure. At this point, you can turn your mixer to medium to high speed, and you're gonna continue to mix the 2 ingredients together until you achieve soft peaks. Once you notice the meringue starts to seize up a little bit, feel free to stop your mixer and just take the whisk up and double check to see if a light soft peak has formed. At this point, we can start our mixer up again and start by slowly adding in a little bit of castor sugar, or in the US, granulated sugar, a little bit at a time. Once you've added all your sugar and let the mix continue to beat, you'll start to notice that there's a very glossy finish to the mixture and that you start to achieve those stiff peaks. Like we've discussed in some of my other videos when we work with whipped cream, the best way to check for stiff peaks is to take the beater, run it around the bottom of the bowl in a light, gentle circular motion, and flip it upside down to make sure you've achieved those stiff peaks. If you don't achieve the stiffness on the first time around, that's totally okay. Go ahead and give it another beat with the mixer, and once it's ready to go, we can top our lemon meringue pie. There really is no art to how you can do this. I personally dolloped all of the meringue gently on the top of the pie, a little bit at a time, and once I got all of the meringue added, I did start to use the back of a spoon or an offset spatula to move the meringue around to create those swooping motions. Once you have the desired look, you're going to set the oven to 300 degrees and you're going to bake for another 15 minutes or until the meringue becomes slightly golden brown. You'll know the pie's done when there's a very slight jiggle. Once out of the oven, you can go ahead and use a kitchen torch to torch the entire top of your meringue to really get that additional golden brown color. You can toast this as much or as little as you'd like, but it's going to give the same effect as a toasted marshmallow. So depending on how much you like that flavor, again, you can do as little or as much toasting as you want. As you can tell, I had a couple spots here that did get a little toasty, so make sure not to get too close to the pie. However, it turned out wonderful. I absolutely love how this turned out. The recipe was very user-friendly. The only thing I will say is it probably could have used a little bit less lemon zest. It was so sour. We all were puckering as we ate it, but it was still so good. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. The link to the recipe is in the caption below, so feel free to check that out. This is Jillian from Maxine Makes Magic, and I hope you have a magical day.